from a crowded boat off the coast of Vietnam to the bright lights of 30 Rock. Today's guest has lived the kind of story most of us only report on. We're going behind that journey and her byline.
When you think about your experience and your family's experience coming here to America and, setting roots here and starting off really from square one, how do you think that experience shaped who you are as a person today and who you are as a journalist?
I know without a doubt everything that they went through, all the struggles that we faced, 100% set me up very well for what I do today.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm very excited to have Vicky Nguyen here as the very first guest of News Break's Behind the Byline podcast. Vicky, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted to be with you, Maria.
Transparently, we've known each other for several years. We were actually competitors, right? Friendly competitors.
Yes. It's funny. I always say Asian before station. So even though I worked at the NBC station in the Bay Area and you were at CBS, I always just saw you as like someone who we could be at the same station and the next job, And so I was always an admirer of your work, happy for you, happy for your wins and your successes and rooting you on from afar. Technically, our stations did compete.
Same. I always admired you. And I knew that you were going to go far, that, NBC Bay Area wasn't going to be your last stop. So I'm excited to dive into your career trajectory and how you started. So my first question for you is, did you always know you wanted to be a journalist?
Absolutely not. Like most refugee, immigrant, Asian kids growing up in America in the 80s and 90s, I thought I would go into one of the fields where I saw a lot of Asians represented, which was medicine, law, or engineering, maybe business.
Maybe a doctor, like my family.
Yeah, exactly. It was like doctor, lawyer, engineer, basically. So when I went to college at the University of San Francisco, I actually by then had kind of honed it down to physical therapist, sports medicine. I thought that would be a great career because it was one of the top 20 growing careers at that time. When I entered college, it was 1996 and it was supposed to be stable. You were supposed to be able to earn a good income. And I thought that was very attainable. And it wasn't until halfway through my college career that I met a dear friend of mine who you also know, Tuan Lam, who was also a reporter in the Bay Area at Cron. But when we were just little college kids, he introduced me to this world and said, listen, I'm doing a bunch of television internships. I want to be a broadcast journalist. And I was like, what is that? What do you mean you want to do that? I've seen Thuy Vu on Channel 2. She was a Vietnamese American reporter on the air at the time, in the late 90s. So I knew what it was. I just didn't have any way of connecting the dots that maybe I too could follow in those footsteps until Tuan made it very tangible, very real. And at that time, I was also taking organic chemistry and it was not computing. Those 3D molecules were not copacetic with my brain. So it was the perfect time to make the transition from being a biology major to a communications major. I still ended up with a bio minor, which actually has helped me a lot with all the science reporting we do now on vaccines and GLP-1 drugs and what have you. So none of the time was wasted, but it was not one of those childhood dreams, I'm going to become a journalist. I just didn't even think that was a dream that was possible for me until I met someone, and that really did change the course of my career.
It's so crazy how you can meet one person and that can just really change, again, your life.
Yeah, it's the butterfly effect.
And so obviously, I was in the business for a long time as well. And back then, TV was so different. News was so different. So tell me how you even got your start. And, just to introduce viewers to you, you are today a consumer investigative correspondent for NBC News and a daily anchor there.
Yes. And on my reports, you can see if you love the Today Show or Nightly News with Tom Yamas, who just took over the show from Lester Holt. So now I work here at 30 Rock, which is this famous building in New York City, never a place I saw myself or imagined myself, but I did exactly kind of a very textbook sort of progression through my career. So I went and I got the communications degree. But while I was at school, I wrote for the school newspaper, the Foghorn. I interned at a bunch of the local television stations, the Fox-owned station in Oakland, California, KPIX in San Francisco. And I even did a stint at the San Francisco Bureau of CNN. And I was that was my very first television internship. And I was terrible, objectively terrible. I was really shy, like a wallflower. I didn't know to ask, the correspondents if I could just shadow them and go on every shoot. So mostly what my internship
It's
consisted
intimidating
of
though,
was,
right?
yeah.
Stepping into a
Oh, it was
newsroom
very
and seeing the
intimidating.
talent and these people who are so good at their craft.
Exactly. So I just stuck to answering the phones. And then I realized after that internship, wow, I didn't really make the most of that. Let me take another crack at it. And so I approached the second internship in a very different way. Like, I'm just going to ask everyone questions. I'm going to ask people if I can follow them. And that made a huge difference. Like Manny Ramos, Roz Plater, these were incredible local news reporters in the Bay Area who took me under their wing. Tracy Mitchell, who was over at Channel 2, the Fox affiliate in Oakland. I got the guts to finally figure out ways to be useful to them, but also for myself to learn what it really meant to be a reporter, being in those live trucks. Your office is really a live van. I don't think people really understand. Like, you kind of go into the bureau, maybe check in, maybe sit in for the news meeting, make your pitches, but then you're out in the field reporting on fires and gas prices and whatever else. You're not kind of in an office in a four-walled building.
8 to 10 hours a day.
Right? Exactly. And I did all those internships. Thuy Vu was another amazing mentor of mine. It was awesome to be able to work under her. And she was so generous with me. So I did those internships. I graduated, and it was the summer of 2000. I went to the Asian American Journalists Association conference, and it was being held in New York City that year. And I had 20 VHS tapes. I mean, this was the year 2000. We were still on VHS tapes, Maria.
I remember
pushing
those
this
days.
right into the VCR. It wasn't like now kids are like, here's my reel, it's on YouTube, they've got a link. I had paper, resumes. I had resume VHS tapes, and I met the general manager of Central Florida News 13. It was a 24-hour local cable station, and they operated in Orlando, and I somehow convinced him to watch my tape, and he said, okay, what is your hotel room number? And this wasn't something creepy or weird. He actually was telling his news director, call this woman. He told me, be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'm going to have my news director call you. And that started my career. So I worked in Orlando.
And how old were you again?
I was 21. I was 21. So literally 6 weeks after meeting that general manager, having my interviews, I was taking all of my things, packing them into my little Honda Civic, and having that car transported across the country from the Bay Area to Orlando, Florida, where I started as a one-man band. I worked there for a year and 9 months, got my next job at the ABC station in Reno, Nevada, which was a huge step up for me because now I was working with a photographer and I was doing live shots
actually,
every
Vicky,
day.
can you explain to listeners what is a one-man band? So what did you do that first job?
In the first job as a one-man band, that meant that I shot all of my own stories. I carried my tripod, my camera everywhere, and it was just me, the reporter. I didn't work with anyone in the field, so I was responsible for all of the interviews, driving myself wherever we needed to go. I was constantly getting lost because back then we used map books. And if anybody knows anything about Orlando, there are a gazillion lakes in Orlando. And so a street will be called one thing. You'll hit a lake, and then on the other side, the street is named something else. So it's very easy to get lost, especially when you have, spatial challenges as I do. So yeah, I was shooting, editing, writing, doing all of it. But it was such a trial by fire because I had to be so scrappy and do it all. I learned very quickly. It was like a crash course, accelerated course in journalism 101.
A boot camp, if you will.
Yeah. You didn't have time to think about, whatever was happening. You just had to really be responsive, be in the moment, try not to make the same mistakes 2 times, and then, keep it moving. But that was my first job. And who would have known that years later when the pandemic hit and I was living in New York City, that all those skills would come flooding back to me and that I'd be shooting my own stories again by myself in my apartment because of the lockdowns. So, all these things these skills that you gain in any industry, at the time, sometimes you're like, oh man, this is a real grind. But you kind of never know how that knowledge is going to come back and serve you really well later in your career. So I always say to my mentees and my interns, say yes to the different assignments, say yes to adding new tools to your toolbox, because once you learn something, it can always be of value to you. And it's one more little asset that you have that could really help you in the future.
Yeah. I mean, as journalists, we're used to just really being on our toes, being able to pivot, right? Make some some quick decisions right then and there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I had to pivot like quite a bit, but I kind of went crisscross the country. Worked in Reno, then I worked in Phoenix, Arizona for 3 years, and then I went back to the Bay Area. So I've worked at ABC, I've worked at Fox, I've worked at NBC, I've worked at cable stations owned by Time Warner, and then eventually landed at the network here in New York City.
So this is one of my favorite questions that I get when people ask me about being in the industry. So I'm going to ask you, but what would you say are your favorite stories and maybe your most memorable story that you've done?
Oh gosh. Okay. So this is an interesting question because I can tell you what I think were some of the most monumental stories that changed the trajectory of my career. One of them being my investigation into Cisco Foods. This is like a massive company, food service company, that if you've ever eaten at a restaurant, a school, a hospital, a nursing home, a cafeteria, anywhere, there is a high likelihood you've eaten Cisco food. We did an investigation into their unsafe food handling practices. It resulted in an almost $20 million settlement from Cisco. It was the largest consumer settlement in California history. And I know it really put me on the map for the investigative team at NBC News, the network. But I will say some of the stories that really stick with me and I feel are most impactful are the ones where you are very invested in the people, the sources who trust you to tell their stories. We did another story with a widow whose husband worked at the United States Postal Service, and he worked at a facility in Oakland that processes mail. And he had some sort of an accident, and his coworkers saw him on the ground. They saw he was injured and unconscious, blood, pooling around him. And you would think in this day and age, I mean, this happened in like the 2000s, we all have a cell phone in our pocket. The first thing you would do is call 911. But the U.S. Postal Service is a very rules-based culture in the agency. And the rule was that you have to call your supervisor. If there's an emergency on the floor, you don't call 911, you don't take matters into your own hands, you call your supervisor, and then they go up the chain of command. So in this case, many, many valuable minutes ticked by where someone could have been calling for an ambulance and calling 911 for emergency response, but instead they were calling one supervisor who called another supervisor. Many minutes, at least 15, possibly many more, elapsed before someone finally had the wherewithal to call 911. So when we talked to Larnie Makashib, she's Filipino, she was a widow. She lost her husband in this accident, and we'll never know if, had he gotten a more prompt emergency response, if he would still be with us today. But that story stays with me. It eventually changed the policy across the USPS for its 500,000 workers that, yes, if you see someone in a medical emergency, you are empowered to call 911. You don't have to call your supervisor first. So that story, like there's those kinds of stories that have impact, but like I'll never forget Larnie and her family and what it took for them to go on camera and tell us what had happened and how painful that was for them, but that they didn't want another family to go through what they had. So those stories with people, I think about them all the time. Like there's just so many stories we did on sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and at various, private schools and that sort of thing. And we talked to parents, we talked to survivors, and I'm just really grateful that I have the opportunity to have these meaningful connections with people. They'll stay with me forever. I tell my kids about them. I tell people I meet about them. I think we have so much humanity shared amongst us, and we can learn so much from each other. And that's kind of the best and most rewarding part of the job is you cross paths with people that you may never otherwise meet in your life. But it is because we are journalists, it's because we have the privilege and responsibility of asking questions and finding answers and holding people accountable that we get to make a difference with our work. And every day is different. I'm learning something new all the time. It never gets boring. Sure, is it stressful? Yes. Are there deadlines? Yes. Do you work with all kinds of people who might not always be on your same wavelength? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you have a product, you have a story or multiple stories that you've told by the end of an 8 or 10 or 15-hour shift. And it is like the first draft of history, as they say, that you're recording. So I think if you are naturally a curious person and you want to have access to what's happening in the world, it is like one of the most fulfilling professions.
Yeah, I think, when I talk to people about the business, I think that is the most rewarding part of it is you're crossing paths, like you said, with people that you otherwise may not have come across. But more than that, you're diving deep into some of their darkest days, their brightest days. and they're really trusting you to tell their story. I think that's what's so rewarding about it at the end of the day, and you're making a difference.
Yes, we certainly hope so. And then in my job as a consumer correspondent, we also get to do a lot of fun things too. 2 days ago, I was talking about the price of gold and what does that mean if you are considering buying gold for the holidays with jewelry, or if you maybe are sitting on a treasure trove at home. Someone messaged me after seeing the story and they were like, oh, my parents got me a lot of gold for our wedding, however many years ago, and it's just been sitting in a safe deposit box, and I just went and got it and weighed it. And I just think it's just so funny because like sometimes it's something light and fun that, people are like, oh, I didn't realize gold was so valuable right now. It's like $4,100 an ounce, up from $2,000 just, like a year and a half ago. Or we were in the warehouses of StockX, which if you're a sneakerhead, everybody knows what I'm talking about, but it's a marketplace for really hard to find things like really nice shoes or apparel or, Labubus, collectibles, what have you. And it's just like the stock market. The idea is if it is something of value, highly coveted, well, its price is going to be high. You're going to pay a premium for it. But maybe you're going to find some Jordans that are in a color combination or a size combination that nobody else wants, and they're going to get, sold below retail. But it was very cool to help people see a different marketplace they might want to go for hard to find items so they can avoid scams, because this is the holiday season. People want like really special, cool gifts, and the scammers know that, and they pop up with these really sophisticated websites this time of year offering things that are too good to be true, and they make a lot of money from unsuspecting customers that way. So my umbrella as a consumer investigative correspondent is so broad, and I can pretty much cover whatever I want. I have a lot of like great ideas and pitches, and I just have to find a show, home for them. But that's also really fun. You get to be creative and you get to pull stories like from your own real life and your own experiences.
Yeah, sometimes you just have no idea what you're going to do that day, right?
Right.
So, Vicky,
yeah.
Tell me really quickly, you started, I'm assuming, as a general assignment reporter, as many do when they're starting in their careers. How did you actually get into investigative reporting and then consumer investigative reporting?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think most people who start off in broadcast journalism should start as general assignment reporters. That means you cover everything. If there's a shooting, if there's a flood, if there's an accident, you are on the scene reporting live. That is how you learn your who, what, when, where, why skills, right? You learn how to figure out what's going on, get to the stakeholders and the sources who have the right information, and then take all of the information and make it into something that is digestible for your viewers and tell them the story of what happened, why it matters to them, maybe why they should avoid this road, or maybe, what is a crazy weather situation that's coming into their neighborhood. So you are kind of that first line of defense in informing people of what's happening in their immediate local community. I think that's a super valuable foundation to build. It wasn't until I was at NBC Bay Area, and I was probably about like 12 years into my career. I was pregnant with my second daughter, and the management at NBC Bay Area decided we want to make the largest local investigative unit in the country. We want 5 on-air reporters, we want 5 producers, and we want 3 photographers, like a dedicated unit that is going to hold the powerful accountable. That was our mantra, and that was our, North Star. And because I had already been a general assignment reporter, and at that point I was like doing special projects reporting as well, they came to me and said, we want to put you in the unit. And I think the reason they asked me, was because I would always do things in the margins. Like even when I was a general assignment reporter, if there was a special project story to be done or a promotional story or some other feature story outside of my beats, I would volunteer to do it. I would get it done. Sometimes I would work in the margins, as they say, right? So like you have your shift, but like, can you come in a little early and do an interview? Can you stay a little late and do something? So I kind of was that person. And then when the opportunities came up and the bosses were hiring and looking around the newsroom, they were like, oh, that one, because she already is doing it. She's already doing some of the extra things. She treats the people around her kindly, and we know she can get it done. So I think a lot of what you're doing today makes such an impact on what you're going to be doing in the future. And you don't even know it yet. Like there have been so many opportunities that have come my way that I didn't even know existed. Like the show that I anchor right now, NBC News Daily. That didn't exist when I came to the network 6.5 years ago. They used to have a streaming show, and it was all on NBC News Now. And I got asked to fill in. It always starts with like someone's asking you to do something, and you in that moment have the agency to say yes or no, and you get to say it with whatever attitude, whatever mindset, however you want to approach it. you don't have to say yes to everything, but especially when you're young in your 20s and you're starting out somewhere, saying yes more often than not is the right thing to do, because you're going to learn something. You're going to make a new friend. You're going to make some kind of impression, hopefully a positive one, but you're going to add more knowledge to your own toolbox and your own, ability.
I mean, going back to you taking your first job, I mean, packing your car and taking that leap of faith and taking that first job in TV, who knows if you would have said no, or you said, you know what, I want to go here or there, where you would have ended up.
It was far. Orlando was really far from California. It's East Coast. It was like, a 4.5-hour flight. You're in 2 different time zones. Yes. But at that time, it was like, look, you graduated from college. You want a first job. It was between that job offer in Orlando, Florida for $26,000 a year in the year 2000, or a job offer from the ABC station in Sioux City, Iowa for $18,500. Both paid overtime. But I mean, that was so significantly less than what my peers were making. I'm going into their fancy consulting jobs and teaching jobs and whatever else they were doing. I was making like an hourly wage, basically, with a 4-year degree. And I think my parents were like, that's interesting. Is that why you went to college? Is that what that was for? But that is, that was the entry point. And I will say too, to anyone who is starting their first job and maybe the salary is not what you thought it was going to be, like, you have a lot of growth potential, a lot of opportunity. Get into the roles that are going to give you the experience that you need. And luckily for me, they did lead to big salary jumps as I progressed along my career. But journalism is not something I would recommend anyone get into if they're trying to get rich. If you really want to be wealthy, you're probably going to do that with AI. You're probably going to do that as an entrepreneur in business of some sort. Or you're going to go into a tried and true profession where it kind of, you have a real general idea of what the salaries are. Most journalists are not wealthy. They are doing a job that earns them enough money and is fulfilling in many other ways. And I would say, find a partner then who's going to help you with the financial part of it all. That certainly helps. And that's kind of the reality. That is the practical matter. There are a few people in our job making millions of dollars a year, but that tippy top of the pyramid, there are very few spaces up there.
Yeah, I've always said, you're in journalism because you have the passion to tell a story, to connect with people, and to make a difference.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the access that you get is pretty remarkable. The kinds of spaces that we're in, the people we get to talk to, there is so much value to that as well. So I think people, sometimes forget about that and they're looking at the tangibles, but there's a lot of intangibles that make this a really rewarding career as well.
Right. You get a front seat basically to history. So Vicky, one of the things I do want to talk about with you is, again, I've known you for several years. To be a journalist myself, when you're looking at your peers that it is not an easy job. And to see somebody with a family, and that they're balancing a lot. And so, Vicky, you're not only a journalist, but you are a wife, you're a mother of 3, and you're also an author. So I'd love to talk about Boat Baby, your book. Tell me,
thank you.
How did you say, you know what, I'm doing all these things, now I want to become an author?
So Boat Baby is really my family's story, and it really chronicles my parents' escape from Vietnam and really my journey in America from being a boat baby refugee to a network correspondent and anchor in one generation. I think that is remarkable. I think it is a testament to the fact the American dream is very much alive. Growing up in America, I always revered books. I loved reading. I read Judy Blume and Roald Dahl and Beverly Cleary, anything I could get my hands on, right? I looked up to authors. And when I became a journalist and this opportunity came up that, hey, you know what? You're now at the network. Your family story is really kind of incredible. Maybe you should consider writing it down. And I thought, wow, a memoir in my 40s, it doesn't seem like I've actually lived enough life to tell a story that would be worthy of a memoir. But then I looked at all of the things that my parents did, the decisions that they made, the people who they were before they were just my mom and dad. And I realized, if we're talking about telling my family story, yes, there is a tale to be told here. And I'm so grateful Boat Baby is in the world. It made the New York Times bestseller list. And I think why it connected and has been a hit with readers is because you will see yourself in our story. You can be from Germany or Greece or Lebanon or America. All of us have come from somewhere at some point. All of us have complex relationships within our families. And if you're lucky enough to be an American, you recognize that what makes America great is truly our diversity. The fact that this country has so many cultures and languages and religions and ideologies and foods and people, it does create friction. But out of that friction comes incredible innovation. It comes incredible learning. We are not a homogenous country. And I think that's why we are a superpower. So I'm really happy to be sort of a living example of that, to write that down, to put it out there, to help people see that their fellow Americans are incredibly generous. I mean, we were sponsored to this country by 2 churches and by, the Ware family and the incredible people who got together and said, why wouldn't we help Vietnamese refugees from half a world away? Let's make sure they get the clothes they need, special food from their country like Mic Mum, which in the 80s, I don't even know where they found fish sauce to put into our little apartment in Eugene, but it made my parents feel like, whoa, there's a little piece of home with us here. And their own story is reflective of the 3 million or so Vietnamese people who fled by boat, from also Cambodia and Laos. From 1975 to 1992, they're collectively loosely known as boat people. I was only 8 months old when my parents fled the country, so that's why the title of the book is Boat Baby. But the chapters are short, and I think, I've heard from people ages 8 to age 80 who've read the book. I think it's highly accessible, and I'm just really happy to have it. It's out there floating on the waves. People continue to pick it up, recommend it, choose it for their book club, and I could not be more grateful and honored. And every time someone says, wow, that moment really hit home with me, or this chapter, I write a lot about my career. A lot of the questions you've asked me, I do talk about in the book, in more detail in terms of just what got me into this business. How did I negotiate my pay raises? What did I do when I, encountered people that are tough to work with? There was definitely a degree of sexism. There's definitely, instances where you're working with people you're not comfortable with. How do you have those difficult conversations? These are things I hope my daughters will learn from. I hope that they will read and see themselves and understand their grandparents better and their own heritage, but also that will empower them when they become professional working women at some point.
I know this question may be a little bit broad, but when you think about your experience and your family's experience coming here to America and setting roots here and starting off really from square one, how do you think that experience shaped who you are as a person today and who you are as a journalist?
I love that question. I know without a doubt everything that they went through, all the struggles that we faced, 100% set me up very well for what I do today. And that is I have never heard my parents complain. Their motto really is never complain, never explain. They just don't complain. If they were discriminated against when they were trying to start their businesses, they found another way through, above, around, over that obstacle. They've never referred to themselves as survivors. They've never talked about trauma. Now, I'm not saying that their way is the only way or the best way, but I know that their relentless optimism and their grit and their work ethic, those are all things that they controlled. And they were very big believers in focusing on what they could control to move themselves forward. They didn't have a lot of anxiety about the future because they believe in fate. A lot of what they grew up with was whatever will be, will be. What's going to happen is going to happen. So let's control what we can. Can we get hired for this job? Can we go to this school? Can we improve our English? Can we work really hard? They did all of those things. And now I look at the way that I apply myself in the different spaces where I find myself. And I just recognized a lot of what they taught me really through osmosis, honestly. They weren't really verbal explaining these things to me. It was just what I saw. I saw them working 7 days a week. I never heard them complaining. I saw them just kind of always trying to find the sunny side up part of the egg. And I definitely think some of it's genetic, but a lot of it is modeled. And I think that they have given such a gift to me because of what they modeled through their hard work. They came here to give me a better education. That was the catalyst for why they decided to escape Vietnam. They had this 8-month-old baby and they were like, you know what? We can't have her growing up under this communist government where she's going to go to school and be taught things that we don't agree with, where she's going to be asked to report on what her parents are talking about at home. That was really the straw that broke the camel's back, because I wasn't born until 1978. That was 3 years after the fall of Saigon. My parents had already been living under the communists for 3 years. My dad had been a medic in the South Vietnamese army. My mom had worked for various American companies. And so they were on the losing side of the war, the South Vietnamese. It was very difficult for them to find like legitimate work and rebuild their lives and rebuild a career. So they, like so many other people, thought, you know what, we need to go to a place where they're advertising the land of opportunity, the home of the free and the brave. Let's give ourselves a shot. And it was really having a child that made them take that leap, take that risk. And so today, when I look at, in some pockets of the country, the anti-immigrant sentiment, I also believe there are so many more people who don't feel that way, who represent the best in Americans, which is a generous, giving, loving spirit of like, you know what? We welcome our neighbors. We welcome people who want to come here and make this country a better place. That spirit is still alive. And I think we hear a lot about the opposite side of it all. So I'm happy the book is coming out now because it is such a reminder to people of what America can be and what it has been for someone like me.
That's beautiful. Last question for you with the book. Have your daughters read it? And, what is the one thing that you want them to walk away with when they do read it?
So my middle daughter, Odessa, she's 13 now. She was like an amazing copy editor for me. She picked up on typos. She really read like multiple versions of the book. My little one is 9 now. So I think maybe next year, like when she wants to read it, maybe she could read it this year. But the oldest one, I feel like she heard a lot of it as it was being written, chapters I would read out loud. And I don't know that she wants to get into all the details of how her parents met, because I met my husband when I was in high school. So I think she wants to take a little step away and then she'll revisit it later because she like lived it, you know what I mean? And she's like a typical teenager who probably thinks it's a little cringy to read about her parents' origin story. What I hope anyone else will take away from it, the power of having faith in yourself, the control that you have over how you show up in the world. I think recognizing that you have a lot of control over your destiny and you can put your energies toward that and not toward worrying about what may happen. Do your best and forget the rest, as they say.
So Newsbreak, they just recently launched a new AI agent to help the readers and viewers curate their own personal feeds based on interests. I'd like to ask you, if you could curate your own newsfeed, what would it be? Would it be something investigative, investigative news, or would it be fun? Are you a foodie? Do you like clothes, fashion? What would your newsfeed look like?
Oh, it's so funny. So of course, yes, I love original investigations. I love learning about what's happening in the world. Then it's got to be food and fitness because I love cooking. Like I don't really have a ton of time, but I do find that that's very enjoyable because to me, it's a hobby, but there's also something very productive about it that everybody can enjoy at the end, hopefully, if it turns out well, like my focaccia. And I'm loving the fact that like it's so easy to learn how to cook and make things now because everything has an accompanying video. Like you're not just looking at a black and white cookbook and wondering like, is this bubbling enough? You can actually see it when you watch a video of someone else making it. So it's got to be world news, investigations, definitely food. And for me, fitness, I'm like, I'm 47. So I'm in my like weight vest, weightlifting, like we're trying to do all of the things to preserve our longevity. And increasingly the research keeps showing how like we as women, we lose our bone density, we lose muscle mass. So I'm trying to like really focus on, even if it's like 15 minutes a day, 3 days a week, getting some weights into the routine. I'm just always looking for ways to stick around longer.
I have no idea how you balance everything anyway, and then fitting in a workout in the middle of your day, Vicky. So,
well, I know you're a super amazing yoga buff, and I've been very inspired by like your amazing videos and like the poses and things that you can do because it takes so much strength and flexibility. The way I do it, and I will say this to anyone, I have a lot of help. My parents moved to the East Coast from the West Coast when we all decided, yes, let's go for it. Let's try out this network job. So I have my parents who live with us 5 days a week when they're not in their like apartment nearby. That's huge. So anyone that you see who seems like they're doing it and juggling it, it's because they have tremendous help. That's what it takes. It's like there's no smoke and mirrors to it. And anyone who pretends like they're doing it on their own, that's sus. And that's a big red flag.
I would say your family's with you.
Yeah, we need everybody. We need, like, I'm trying to bring back multi-generational living because I think it is genius and many cultures do it. And that's what keeps the elders young because they're productive. It keeps the younger generations connected to their heritage and to their grandparents. And it just helps everyone out. It is really the natural way of being. I think kicking your kids out at 18 or 21, it makes no sense to me.
It takes a village, right? That saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vicky, one last thing. Where can we buy your book?
Boat Baby is anywhere. I recommend buying it from your local bookstore to always support a local business. But if you want to order it on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, you can find it.
Well, Vicky, thank you so much again. Thank you for sitting down with us, our very first guest here.
Such an honor for me, Maria. So good to catch up with you.
Well, if you were inspired by this conversation and want to learn more, you can find a link to Vicky's book, as well as links to all her investigative work on NBC News in the show notes for this episode. Until then, thank you so much. I'm Maria Said Medina. We'll see you soon.